Relative to its current length, Kagurabachi is one of the most exciting and high-quality manga I have read in a long time, and this is due to a myriad of factors, including its cinematic presentation, bombastic fight scenes, engaging sidecast, and compelling antagonists. But one aspect of the series that can't go unaccounted for is the very protagonist of this series, Chihiro Rokuhira, Kagurabachi's main character, and the perfect person to play the central role in this story. Today, I'll be singing Chihiro's praises and explaining exactly why he's so suited for this manga. Kagurabachi is a story that on its surface seems to be about revenge and all of the negative emotions that are associated with it. And while to some degree this is true, there is a very authentic desire to create hopeful and happy emotions with the connections made in this manga that you wouldn't necessarily expect from it based on a first glance. Chihiro Rokuhira finds himself in a similar position as a character, and it's because he mirrors the narrative structure of the manga so well that I find him to be the perfect protagonist for this manga. The first impression of Chihiro and Kagurabachi as a story alike follow a very similar structure, and it is no coincidence that they do so. The initial expectations of this manga and main character are established by the first chapter and introduction that shows off only one aspect of this manga's appeal. This first chapter essentially says that this manga will contain extreme violence, a stoic protagonist, a revenge-based plot, and an almost comical commitment to being edgy. After reading more and more chapters though and being introduced to Char specifically, the story starts to reveal its true intent and tone more, demonstrating a very fine balance between the extremely stylistic and flashy moments of action with the slow and heartfelt moments that are necessary to build connections between people. It's no coincidence that this softening of the narrative reveals itself when Chihiro first comes into contact with Char, a character whose purpose is to reveal Chihiro's more caring traits. Now, I don't want to downplay the darker aspects of Kagurabachi or Chihiro as a protagonist himself, but to truly appreciate those moments of darkness and edge and understand why they feel so fulfilling and cathartic, one must understand the lighter side of the narrative. While many antagonists and villains in Kagurabachi exist to create a physical and mental conflict for the character, Kunishige and Char exist to explain why we are meant to care about his problems in the first place and how exactly his upbringing has shaped who he is today. The responsibility he feels to protect Char and later save her once he fails to do so is integral to liking Chihiro in the first place. The genuine appreciation and love he had for his father is shown in flashbacks to explain why his revenge means so much, and why, at the end of the day, I don't think his priority even is vengeance. Now, in saying that, I understand that many people will interpret this to mean that I think Chihiro doesn't want revenge at all, and that's just not true. A fundamental aspect of his character is his desire to cut those down who wield his father's blades, but in that desire lies my point. I think that more than killing bad people, Chihiro prefers to save good people, and in his father's case, save his reputation as a hero whose katana were capable of ending a war. Now, in a world where saving good people requires killing bad ones, this may seem like a pointless distinction, but it's one that I think is absolutely necessary to properly contextualizing Chihiro's character and his overarching role as a protagonist thus far. There are many different points in the story where, if revenge and killing was his priority, Chihiro would have made an entirely different decision than the one we see him actually make in the manga. And in fact, if revenge were his priority, he would be an entirely different character. In the very first chapter of the story, the debut of this manga, the moment where I think Kagurabachi is at its most edgy and surface level, the first time we see current day Chihiro actually display his emotions is not when he comes into contact with someone directly connected to his vengeance, but when he sees innocent people strung up by Yakuza scum. This is the first of many examples that demonstrate Chihiro's really emotional and empathetic perspective throughout the story. In chapter 3, upon realizing that he doubted Char and put her in danger as a result, Chihiro prioritizes saving her over worrying about the enchanted blades, almost chastising himself for misplacing his focus and immediately stepping up to save her. Not because she's useful to his plans per se, but simply because she's a little girl in need of help. Help that Chihiro can provide because of the strength of his father's blades. In chapter Chapter 9, Chihiro puts his body on the line to mitigate the damage of Sojo's attack, despite it basically guaranteeing that his chances of winning this fight would plummet. His motivations for doing so are pretty simple as well. Not only are there dozens of innocent people that would be harmed by this attack if he didn't step up, but these people would be harmed by his father's blade, tarnishing the reputation of Kunishige irreparably and going directly against what it is his dad wanted to achieve with his weapons. In the very next chapter, upon realizing that Char had been captured, without a moment's hesitation, Chihiro abandons his battle with Sojo to save Char without a single thought about Cloud Gouger. Even in more recent chapters, we see Chihiro's bloodthirstiness and desire for his father's blades completely trumped by his empathy and compassion. Fighting Tenri and wasting the little power Cloud Gouger had left wasn't a strategic play on Chihiro's part. It was one made out of pity, empathy, and compassion for the situation this boy had found himself in. Just like Chihiro himself, the opponent before him had only wanted to make his father proud, fulfill his duty, and protect what it is that his dad had valued. Chihiro had the same goals and aspirations, and as such, he can't help but clash with him in an attempt to give him an honorable death. When Tenri's body can't contain the power of the Daten Seki anymore and dies, we see Chihiro unable to hide his sadness, agonizing over a person who he never knew, a person who wanted to take his life just moments ago. All of these examples illuminate a pretty interesting fact about Chihiro, a fact that becomes pretty obvious if you care to read into Kagurabachi at all, and that is the fact that Chihiro is, at his core, a deeply caring person, potentially one of the most caring characters in the entire story of Kagurabachi, despite what his normal expression may portray. Only someone truly focused on saving his allies and maintaining his father's honor could look at the man who caused him so much pain and suffering and choose to flee for the sake of his mission, for the sake of his friend. Correspondingly, I think that Kagurabachi is a deeply empathetic story that aims to do more than provide a spectacle. A story that displays its hopefulness on its sleeve, even when it's hidden in the shadows. Much like the Batman inspiration that Hokuzono has mentioned, Kagurabachi and its main protagonist could be misinterpreted as a story that's dark for the sake of being dark, edgy for the sake of being edgy. And while I don't necessarily think that being edgy in itself is a bad thing, the depth of the shadows in both stories only function to highlight the brightness that much more. Chihiro, like Bruce, is a character who is shrouded in angst and a tragic past, yet his crusade doesn't exist to perpetuate that same devastating trauma onto those around him. Rather, they embrace their Stygian past to create a better future for innocent people and those that they care about. In order to display this hopefulness better, a variance in tone is necessary. You can see this in basically any good Batman adaptation or even the source material of the comics themselves, as Bruce very often finds himself aiding young children, aiding his rogues gallery, aiding anybody that needs help, even while existing as a symbol of fear for those that deserve his vengeance. Chihiro follows a very similar path. It's the express contrast between Chihiro's serious and calculated demeanor and the heart he wears on his sleeve that makes him so interesting to read about and discuss. And this interesting dichotomy has even been acknowledged in the story by other people in the Kagurabachi universe. Chihiro has been recognized as a guy who is, at his core, very hot-headed, very passionate, very emotional, and very empathetic. Like every good, edgy character, Chihiro isn't just his stoic expression or his vengeful mindset. He's someone who sees the beauty of the katana that his father wielded, someone who wants that legacy to remain as bright and happy as he saw his father. He's someone who wants to cut evil katana wielders down, not out of hate for what they are exclusively, but because of how they disrespect the very swords that they swing. Hokuzono being able to balance this authentic character writing with many moments that are also just badass on a surface level is no small feat either. Now, I say on a surface level when referring to Chihiro's really cool one-liners or action sequences, but that's not entirely true or fair to the story and character himself. Even moments that at a glance seem to exist purely for the sake of hype play into Chihiro's arc and are a direct result of the experiences we've seen him have over the course of this manga. I mentioned earlier that the more violent and intense parts of Chihiro and the story he resides in are important, and this is exactly what I'm referring to. Not only are these action sequences extremely stylish and fun to engage with simplistically, specifically, but they are perfectly interconnected with the authentic and open approach Hokuzono takes with storytelling that makes this manga so enthralling. We don't get a moment as intense as Chihiro's first Kuro shred without the absolutely poetic use of backstory in the same chapter. This change from the past to present scene in this page is absolutely integral emotional buildup to the spread that concludes chapter 15, and it's only possible because of the immense stress of the situation. When pushed to his limits in an attempt to save Char, Chihiro thinks back on his past with his father and pulls from those happy memories the proper mentality necessary for defeating the enemies that stand before him. It's this use of contrast with darkness and lightness, this contrast with the past and with the present, that makes not only the Batman inspiration obvious, but also Hokuzono's very clear passion for the story of Naruto. Naruto's reliance on flashbacks, Naruto's reliance on the contrast between Naruto as a character and Sasuke, as well as all of the things that I've mentioned before with the Batman mythos, just make it clear what Hokuzono values in the stories that he likes to consume and the story of Kagurabachi that he's creating before our very eyes. Many of the traits and writing quirks from these stories that Hokuzono finds so impressive reflect themselves within his own manga, within his own protagonist. Without Chihiro's selflessness, we don't get to see him tank an entire blast of lightning, nearly pass out from the pain before getting into his stance and activating Nishiki. This moment that on the surface is just raw is actually the culmination of a ton of subtle character, narrative, and thematic work on Hokuzono's part. Just as Akuri makes note of, Chihiro's very samurai-esque personality is not just because of how cool he is. That's definitely a contributor, a pretty big one, don't get me wrong, but he's only put in these positions so often because of how deeply he cares for people, Katana, and his father's legacy. Something as simple as bringing a sandwich to Char tugs at the heartstrings while also being the coolest thing he could possibly done in this moment. And that's because there's a contrast between his stoicism and empathetic side, but just as the entire manga has successfully done, this difference only allows for each trait to empower the other, working in harmony to constantly achieve these cool but substantive character moments. His rematch against Sojo, battle with Hiyuki, and pulling together of Mei all embody exactly what it is that I mean. Much of the credit to this amazing execution has to go to the visual presentation of these moments, perfectly orchestrated by Hokuzono, which makes instances that are already amazing in concept that much better and elevated beyond what you would imagine them to be. I mean, eating in the midst of battle, understanding each other, understanding Kunishige, understanding their blades, all while clashing and fighting as ferociously as possible is such a Kagurabachi thing to do. It's such a shonen thing to do, yet the artistic integrity of the scene allows it to feel otherworldly. It allows it to feel very itself. Even the act of trying to understand Sojo in this battle is an exercise in empathy on Chihiro's part, considering how differing their beliefs on Kunishige actually are. To understand how Sojo came to his conclusion and finally grasp what it is that his father told him years ago, yet solidify his own mentality and resolve that much more, is the harmonious combination of emotion and edge that I was previously talking about. The only thing I will do is cut you down with even thicker bloodlust. I mean, god damn, what a line, man. The balancing act that Hokuzono decided to take on when crafting his manga is only possible because of Chihiro. It's only possible because as a person, he walks that line himself. Only Chihiro could tell his blade to pull itself together and summon a stroke of lightning like Thor himself, and that moment also functioned to be very emotional and narratively fulfilling, as well as just obviously really cool. Honoring Hakuri's determination by resolving himself to slay his father's friend is once again something that just perfectly strikes both chords. With every example of this characterization that I mentioned in this video, dozens more take its place in my mind, making me realize how much better for protagonist Chihiro is than I even thought at the beginning of this video, how much more perfectly suited he is for Kagurabachi, and how genius Hokuzono is as an author for crafting the story like this in general. Now, it may sound like I'm reading too far into it or giving it too much praise for some, but with the abundance of examples given all throughout this video, the inspirations that we know Hokuzono has taken from other stories, and the general approach that we've seen him consistently take with this manga, I hope that even the biggest skeptic of this series is given pause. These aren't one-off moments for Chihiro to be dismissed, far from it. In fact, everything about his character functions to elevate those around him, and everything about the characters around him, be it friend or foe, exists to make him a significantly more interesting and dynamic piece of the Kagurabachi puzzle. The intricate dance between protagonists and the story around them is executed flawlessly, all because Chihiro Rokuhira is the perfect protagonist for Kagurabachi. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see an analysis like this for Shoujo, click here and subscribe for more Kagurabachi videos that'll be coming very, very soon. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.